What's up, people? Joe Winko here, your favorite Hawaiian guy, and here's my next episode of Joe Winko Talk. As you can see, the lighting in this video is kind of dark right now. The reason why is because the skin on my face hasn't really been looking so good. I went to the beach a couple days ago and I kind of got sunburn on my face, and that's the reason why I'm sitting in front of the light right now because I'd rather you guys not see my sunburned face. And plus, it's been really humid, and that kind of been making my acne a little bit bad on one side of my face. So that's the reason why the lighting is like this. So just letting you all know. I still really wanted to do an episode of Joe Winko Talk, so I just went ahead and did it anyway, because it's been too long since I done one. So, this is gonna be a long episode of Joe Winko Talk. It's gonna be quite personal also. It's gonna be morbid and gloomy too, but it's also going to be a tad bit scary also, but don't let it alarm you at all. This episode of Joe Anko Talk is going to be about the time when I went on a road trip down Interstate 65 to Alabama with a man who was a Satan worshiper. And just so you all know, I do not worship Satan at all. But I did meet this man on a Satan worshipping website, and first I'm going to explain to you guys some background information to show you how this all ended up happening. So, in August of 2016, me and my adoptive parents were not getting along at all, and we never really got along in the first place because I was never close to my adoptive parents. They're messed up people. But in August of 2016, things started to get out of hand between me and them, and they decided that they didn't want me to live with them anymore, and I didn't want to live with them either. I never wanted to live with them, but they decided that they didn't want me living in the house anymore. So they basically kicked me out of the house. They put me out of the house, but they didn't have the guts to throw me out on the streets yet because they knew that I wouldn't be able to survive on the streets because I'd have no way to get my insulin if I was homeless, and I would eventually die of no insulin. I did a whole episode of Joe Winko talk about that. If you guys would want to know how that would all happen, you could just watch that. I'll have the link to it in the pinned comments. It's called How Did Joe Die? So they didn't have the guts to kick me out on the streets. So what they did was they put me into an apartment, and they were paying for it and everything. They put me out into an apartment in West Dallas, Wisconsin. It's a town outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And they were locked in a lease for 1 year. The lease expired in October 2017, and they told me that when the lease expires, they're not going to help me at all, and then I'm going to become homeless and I'm going to be on the streets and they're not going to help me. So back in 2017, I was trying to find what I was really trying to find was a lover or partner to move in with and someone to go live with to be my lover and partner. I'm still kind of looking for that right now, to be completely honest, but that's what I was trying to find back then. And I had no luck finding it at all, absolutely no luck. So I figured that I was going to become homeless and I was going to end up dying. But I really didn't want to die in the state of Wisconsin at all because I absolutely hated the state of Wisconsin and wanted to leave Wisconsin forever. And I didn't want to die there at all. So I started thinking about death more than usual that year. Because I always kind of thought of death, but I was thinking about it more than usual, and that's probably because of my autism and everything else that was going on. So I signed up for a necrophiliac web form where all these guys who were necrophiliacs were talking about stuff and everything. And just so you all know, I myself am not a necrophiliac at all. The only reason why I signed up for the necrophiliac web form is because back in January of 2016, I almost ended up being taken by a necrophiliac, a guy who wanted to have sex with my dead body. That was a really rough time in my life, and it was not good. I did a whole episode of Joe Winko talk about that. I'll have the link to that in the pinned comment also, so you can watch it. And for those of you who don't know, a necrophiliac is a person who likes having sex with dead bodies. That's what it that's what it means. And I honestly think that's really creepy and fucked up. But I'm kind of into scary stuff anyway. I don't do that, and I don't like that at all. But I thought I was gonna die anyway, so that's the reason why I signed up for the necrophiliac web form. So I signed up for that like right after my adoptive parents kicked me out, and right after I moved into my apartment. And basically, I was just posting about my life on there, really. And I was posting a bunch of pictures of myself on the web form because it was mostly like a gay themed web form. They were talking about these sexy dead guys and they were posting pictures of them and everything. But they had a section where you can post pictures of alive guys, all shit so. And that's where I was posting my pictures at. And the messages I got on there, they were very interesting, but they were also really disturbing. Like a lot of guys were telling me, "Oh, you would look so good on an autopsy table." And there was one man who kept sending me messages over and over again about all of his fantasies he had about brutally murdering me and like stabbing me to death and then watching me bleed out and die and then keeping my body and having sex with it. And then when I start rotting and decomposing, he wanted to have sex with the remains and everything. And it's really creepy stuff and really disturbing also. But I don't know why, but I was so fascinated by all that for some reason, but I still was creeped out by it. But I think the reason why I was fascinated by it is because I'm a fan of horror movies and scary stuff in general. And plus, I really never had anyone send me messages like that before, of them sending me messages about how they want to kill me and what they want to do with my body and everything. So that's why I found it intriguing, but it really did kind of freak me out a little bit. But and I know that's definitely not normal and that that's definitely not okay. But then they started suggesting to me that I should sign up for a Satan worshipping web form. And I'm not a Satan worshiper myself, as I said earlier, but I wanted to sign up for the web form because I wanted to connect with people who were more of outcasts and everything, and people who were like ostracized from society. You guys get what I'm saying? People who are eccentric and outcasts, and I thought that'd be the perfect place for it. So I signed up for the Satan worshipping web form, and as I did on the necrophiliac web form, I started posting pictures of myself there and telling them all who I was. And I also explained my life situation, that me and my adoptive parents weren't getting along, so they kicked me out of the house and put me in an apartment in West Dallas, Wisconsin. But I only got to stay there, was going to stay there for a year because after the apartment lease expires, they weren't going to help me at all, and then I was going to get kicked out of the apartment, and then I was going to end up homeless, and that I was going to end up on the streets dying of no insulin. But I really hated the state of Wisconsin, and I didn't really care about dying at all, but I didn't want to die in the state of Wisconsin. I wanted to die far away from the state of Wisconsin, and that I was trying to find someone to live with so I wouldn't die at all, but that wasn't going good, and that I was upset about all that. So that's basically everything that I explained on the Satan worshipping web forum. So eventually, in December of 2016, I got a message from this man who claimed that he was in his 30s, and he said that he's been following my post on the Satan worshipping web forum. He said that he admired me. He said that he admired me because I was really young. I was 21 years old at that time, just turned 21. He admired me because I was really young and because I didn't fear death at all. And because I didn't care about dying. Like, I still thought it kind of sucked that I seriously thought I was going to die that year, but I didn't really care that much. And he said that he also admired me because it seemed like I hated the world and didn't want to contribute anything to society. And, as much as I hate to admit it, on some level, that actually is kind of true. Where he was getting that from is because I was also talking on the web forums about how I can't hold a job because of my autism, ADHD, and borderline personality disorder. Those make it too stressful and overwhelming for me to hold a job because that's what some people on the web forum were saying. Oh, just get a job so you won't become homeless. But I already tried that and it had some pretty bad results. I'll have to link to those in the pinned comments as well. Then, so that's where he was getting that from. Then he made me an offer. He said that he was going to make me this offer because he admires me. He said that if I couldn't find anyone to go live with, and if I actually did end up becoming homeless in October of 2017 and ended up on the streets, I could just let him know. He'd come to Wisconsin and pick me up, and then he'd give me a ride to this abandoned forest out in the middle of nowhere near the state line of North Carolina and Virginia, but in North Carolina, near the coastal area of North Carolina, and he would drop me off there and drive away and leave me there so I could just die in the forest in North Carolina and so I wouldn't have to die on the streets of Wisconsin at all. So that's the offer he made me. I know that sounds really crazy, but I definitely did appreciate it, really. I was thinking, okay, that's not really quite the solution I was hoping for, but because I really wanted to find like a lover or partner to live with, but I was thinking, well, at least I wouldn't die in Wisconsin then, so I thought, well, okay then. So, me and him started talking every day. We were messaging each other on the site, and I was calling him too, and we were texting each other. And we honestly became very close. Like, I would talk to him about how my day went, he would talk to me about how his day went, and I didn't really learn so much about him. I was mainly just telling him about myself the whole time, and I was telling him about how much I hated my adoptive parents and how much I hated Wisconsin, and he just would listen to all of it. He wouldn't get tired of talking to me at all. And another thing is, I would tell him about my Uncle Mario a lot, and I would also tell him about what I think I'm going to find in the afterlife and on the other side, and he always thought that was very interesting. But I never told him about my YouTube videos, and I also never told him about what the psychic said about how I die out in the forest. I didn't tell him that on the phone. I did eventually end up telling him on the trip, but I didn't tell him that before we met. So some time passed, and fast forward to April 2017. It was late April. It was after I saw the psychic and everything. I was awake one night and I was on the phone with my adoptive parents and we got into a really bad argument. I was mad because they weren't going to help me after my apartment lease expired, and I was mad that they said they were going to have me become homeless, and we were arguing about that. And I didn't tell them about what the psychic said yet either. The whole conversation got really bad and things got out of hand, so we just hung up and I didn't talk to them at all. But I was really angry about that, and back at that time, my sleeping schedule was really out of whack and everything. So I was up the whole entire night, and I was upset about that the whole entire night. All the way till the next morning, it was around 8 a.m. I was still awake, and I was getting kind of tired too. But then Randy called me on the phone. Now, this isn't his real name, but let's just say his name was Randy, the guy I met on the Satan worshipping forum. So he asked me, he said, "Hey Joe, how are you doing?" And I was really upset at my adoptive parents still. So I told him about the argument I got in with I told him about the argument I got in with my adoptive parents. And I said that I was really angry and I really wanted to just get away. And then he asked me, "Oh, well, I'm really sorry about that." And then he asked me, would you want to take a road trip to Alabama with me? I can come to Wisconsin and pick you up if you want to. There's some stuff I have to do along Interstate 65. And for those of you who don't know, Interstate 65 is a major highway in the USA. It starts in northern Indiana and it runs down all the way through Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Alabama. It's a major highway that connects the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico, and I always thought that'd be a really fun trip. I've been on Interstate 65 before because that's one of the roads you take to get to Florida, but I never been down Interstate 65 all the way to Alabama. And also, I never been to Alabama before, so I thought it would be really cool to go there because I always like traveling the states. And plus, I love road trips. And Randy knew that, so that's why he offered that to me because I told him about all the places I wanted to road trip to and why I want to go there. I said, hell yeah, I'd love to go, and I was really excited. And then he told me, okay, I'll be there to pick you up in 19 hours. And because he knew I lived in West Dallas and everything, and he said he calculated it all out. So then we got off the phone, and then I thought it was kind of weird if he's coming from Alabama and he's picking me up from Wisconsin. Now, Alabama is a bit of a ways from Wisconsin, but it's not 19 hours away. Alabama is only 12 hours away from Wisconsin, from where he picked me up from roughly the area that we were going to, because we didn't go like all the way down to Mobile, Alabama. I wish we would have. We went to central Alabama. That's what it seemed like it was, or northern Alabama. So I thought it was kind of weird that it was going to take him 19 hours to get there. But the thing is, I didn't really know where he was coming from, and I figured even if he isn't that far away from you, he probably has some other stuff to do, so that's probably the reason why it's going to take him 19 hours to come to Wisconsin. So I packed up all my stuff and everything, and I packed some red shorts, my cell phone charger, my iPod charger, and a bunch of other stuff, and my insulin stuff and everything. But one thing I forgot to pack were my shaving razors and some shaving cream, and I really wish I would have brought those because my facial stubble started growing back, and yeah, it wasn't pretty at all. So I also texted him the address to the park I wanted him to pick me up from Rainbow Park in West Dallas, Wisconsin. That's a big park in West Dallas, Wisconsin, which really wasn't far away from the apartment building that I was living in West Dallas. And he told me, okay, I'll pick you up from there. And I said, okay, see you then. So after I got all my stuff packed up, I took a nap and I fell asleep. And later that night, he called me and he told me that he just entered Indiana and that he was on his way to Wisconsin. He wasn't that far away, he was only a few hours away. And then he said that he'll be there soon at Rainbow Park in West Dallas, Wisconsin in a couple of hours. Well, not really soon, but you guys get what I'm saying. And I said, okay, I'll see you then. Just give me a call when you're closer. So after we hung up, I just got on my computer and started playing some video games and was waiting for him and everything. And then a couple hours passed, and I calculated that if it was going to take him 19 hours to get there, he should be there roughly by 3 a.m. at the baseball field, because that's where the parking lot of Rainbow Park is. It's near a big baseball field and everything. He called me, and he told me that he was 20 minutes away from the park, and he says, I'll be there soon, so I'll see you soon. I'm driving a silver van. And I said, okay, I'll see you there. So then I got my backpack, and the pictures I was posting on the Satan Worshipping web forum, I was wearing exactly what I'm wearing now, red shorts, no shirt, and a red bandana, and all the pictures I posted on the Satan Worshipping web forum, the red bandana I wear in all my episodes of Joe Winko Talk, and I wanted to make sure that he would recognize me, so I went out dressed the same way I am, like walked out of the apartment and over to the baseball field to where I was going to meet him. And this was in April, and it was at 3 a.m. It was late April, but it was still April, and it was at 3 a.m. in Wisconsin, and it stays pretty chilly up in Wisconsin in April. So I definitely was cold when I walked out of the apartment building, but I didn't really care at all because I was just really excited to go to Alabama because I always love going on road trips. I was like really hyped for that. So I went to the park and I was afraid that there was going to be cops at the park or something because it was 3 a.m. and I thought I might get in trouble for going to the park at 3 a.m. But there was no one out there. And I got to the park and I saw the silver van parked in the parking lot near the baseball field. And remember, I didn't know what this guy looked like. He knew what I looked like, but I didn't know what he looked like. I just knew that he was in his 30s and everything because we didn't really talk so much about him. It was just about the things in my life we were talking about the whole entire time. So I walked over to the van, and when I got close enough to it, I looked inside and I saw that no one was in there at all. And I was like, what the heck? Why isn't anyone in here? And I said, I thought this is the van. He told me it was a silver van and that he was going to be here. So then I turned around and then he was like standing right behind me and it kind of startled me a bit. And I was like, whoa. And then I didn't. Then for a second, I didn't know if he was who I was looking for. I thought he was some guy at the park who was going to get mad at me for being there at 3 a.m. But then he told me, "Oh, you're really tall. I didn't think you were going to be so tall." And then I recognized his voice and I knew right away that it was him. So I finally saw him for the first time. He was a white guy. He was shorter than I am because I'm 6'3". A lot of guys are shorter than I am, and he was skinny and he was wearing a black suit and a black tie, and it was this really narrow black suit and it had these thin white vertical stripes on it, and also he had dark hair and he had like this elfish appearance to him. He didn't have pointy ears at all, but he did have these high cheekbones, and he kind of did remind me of an elf, like something his face did. And he had these big, really bright brown eyes. They almost looked like yellow eyes, but they're these really big, bright eyes. That's the first thing I noticed about him because like they're reflecting the lights in the parking lot. And he said that I was really tall in person, and then I said, "Oh, it's nice to meet you." And I shook his hand and everything, and he shook mine, and he smiled and everything. But then, next thing he did that I thought was really weird, he he grabbed me by the wrist. He didn't like grab me like that, but he like gently grabbed me by the wrist, and he put his hand on my back like he was like escorting me into the car. And he walked me over to the passenger seat. He opened the door and he like slowly pushed me into the passenger seat, and I just thought, okay, that's kind of weird. Why is he doing that? So then he came around and he got inside the car, and I was kind of cold because, as I said, it was April and I was shivering a bit. And then he looked at me and he noticed I was shivering. He was like, "Do you ever wear a shirt?" And then I just laughed and shook my head. And then he reached in the back seat of his car and he grabbed a yellow blanket. And then I was remembering what the psychic said, because she said that she saw me getting in a silver van at a baseball field, and she saw me wrapped in a yellow blanket when I died out in the forest in North Carolina in her psychic vision. If you guys want to know more about that, I'll have to link to that episode of Joe Winko Talk in the pinned comments. So he handed me a yellow blanket. I noticed something else in the back seat of his car. There was a shotgun in the back seat of his car, and there were packages of ammo in the back seat of his car, shotgun ammo. And I kind of got a little uneasy from seeing that, but then I figured, well, we're going to Alabama, and if he's from Alabama, everyone down there owns guns, so it is the USA, so I shouldn't really be worried. And another thing is, now, a lot of people think that because I have autism, I don't understand that my life choices are dangerous and that I don't know the dangers of my life choices, like getting in a van with a stranger at 3 a.m. and driving across state lines with a stranger, especially if he has a shotgun in the backseat of his car, and especially if he's a Satan worshiper. But the fact is, I truly do understand the dangers of that. I knew it was really dangerous to get in the car with him because he could like snap and be some crazy person and end up murdering me. But I didn't really care about it, really, because I was already at a really rough point in my life. I thought I was going to become homeless and be left on the streets for dead without insulin. So even if he did end up murdering me, like, I didn't really care about it at that time. But I would have fought back if he tried killing me, and he would have had to kill me really fast because I would have been fighting back against him the whole entire time. And then I remember when I saw that shotgun in the back seat of his car, I was thinking, okay, so if he actually does end up snapping, and if he decides to shoot me with the shotgun, and this is my autism mind telling me all this, if he does end up snapping and decides to shoot me with the shotgun, I never seen someone shoot a shotgun in real life, but from what I know about shotguns, they're extremely powerful. Like, I figured, for all of you who don't know, I'm 6'3" and I'm 145 pounds. If this guy would have shot me with a shotgun, like, regardless on where he shot me, I would have died really fast. Like, most likely the area he would have shot me would have been my chest, and if he would have shot me in the chest with a shotgun, that would have blown out all my internal organs, and I probably would have died instantly, with if not in a few seconds. Even if he would have shot me in the arm or shot me in the leg, it would have tore off my arm and leg, and then I would have bled out and died at like 5 minutes at most. At maximum 5 minutes I would have bled out. So I was thinking I definitely wouldn't die a slow and agonizing death. Probably agonizing, but definitely not a slow death at all. And if he would have shot me in the head, I probably wouldn't even seen it coming. My ghost would have just woke up and would have been like, what the heck happened? Did I just die? So I wasn't really nervous about that either. But then, as I was thinking all that, I stopped myself and I was thinking, what the heck? Why the hell am I thinking this? This man is my friend. We've been talking since December. He wanted to come here because he knew I was upset that I got into an argument with my adoptive parents, and he wants to take me on a road trip to Alabama, and he knows how much I like going on road trips. So, how awesome is that? So, yeah, that's what happened there. Another thing I noticed about him was that he had scars on his wrist, but he had this symbol carved onto both of his wrists. It was a pentagram symbol, and I've seen that symbol before on the Satan worshipping website, and I thought it was kind of weird that he had that carved onto his wrist. But then I thought about the times when I used to self-mutilate, and I was only doing it because I was really miserable back then. I explained that in a whole episode of Joe Winko Talk, my 2014 suicide story. I'll have the link to that in the pinned comments. But that was the only reason why I did it. So I didn't really think that much of it at all. So after I got in the car and everything, we left the baseball field. We got onto Interstate 94, and we drove down Interstate 94 out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and through the rural fields south of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and eventually we crossed the state lines into Illinois. And around that time, as we were driving through Illinois and as we were driving around the Chicago area, the sun was coming up as we were hitting Gurney Mills, I think. I think it was after we were hitting Gurney Mills. And you know, that's the most beautiful thing when you see the sun coming up over the road while you're on a road trip. That's why I always like leaving at 3 a.m. or at midnight, because you get to watch the sunrise and everything while on the road. That's the best thing ever. And during the whole ride, me and him were talking about how much of assholes my adoptive parents were, and we were also talking about this tornado documentary that I was watching on YouTube. I was telling him about that, and I wasn't telling him about what the psychic told me, but we were talking about that also, about the tornado documentary, but I didn't tell him about what the psychic told me about what would happen to me out in the forest. So we passed, eventually we crossed into the state lines of Indiana, and then we merged onto Interstate 65, and we were driving down Interstate 65. Then eventually, it was morning by the time we got within Indiana somewhat. Then eventually, he told me that we're going to stop somewhere. We stopped at this motel off of Interstate 65, and it was kind of like out in the middle of nowhere. It seems like it was a rural and wooded place. And he checked into the hotel, and he left me at the motel room, and he left some money on the table, and he says, if you need any food, just there's a gas station across the street. And he said that he has to go out and do some stuff, and that he's going to be gone for a couple hours, but he'll be back later. And then I was just like, oh, well, okay. So then he just left me there, and he drove off and left. So basically what I did from there was I just took the money, went across the street and to the gas station, got myself some hot dogs because that's what they were selling there. Then I went back to the hotel room, and I had my iPod with me, and then I pulled out my iPod and started watching some videos on YouTube because the motel also had Wi-Fi. I was watching rerun episodes of the Young Turks on YouTube. That's what I was watching the whole entire day. Then I got tired and I dozed off. Then I woke up again and he still wasn't back yet. And it was like later in the afternoon, and I kept watching videos on my iPod. But then eventually, when nightfall came, he eventually came back, and it was kind of weird because when he left, he was wearing a black suit when he left, but when he came back, he wasn't wearing the same clothes. He was wearing a red flannel, and he was wearing blue jeans. And I was thinking, oh, that's weird. Why did he change his clothes? And I just thought, well, oh, okay. And he asked me how I was doing, and I said, oh, I'm doing good. I'm just watching some episodes of the Young Turks on YouTube, and we were talking about the Young Turks, and I was telling him who they were and everything. Then we just hung out at the hotel room together until we both fell asleep again, because I wasn't really asleep for very long when he left. So then the next day we woke up like early in the morning. He checked out of the motel room, and when we got up back in the car and we drove down Interstate 65, we were heading south on Interstate 65 because we were heading towards Alabama. We drove through Indianapolis, then we kept driving south on Interstate 65 through Indiana. Then we crossed over the Ohio River at Louisville, Kentucky, and we entered the state of Kentucky. Then we continued down I-65 through Kentucky, past Bowling Green, Kentucky, and when we were driving through Bowling Green, Kentucky, I've been through there before, but I've been wanting to go back to see more of the town. I liked Bowling Green, Kentucky because you guys know the show To Catch a Predator. They actually did a sting operation in Bowling Green, Kentucky. This girl was dressed in yellow, and she was pretending to be a 13-year-old girl online, and she was luring these guys over to the house. They all thought that they were going to have sex with her and everything, and then the police came out and busted all of them. So that's the reason why I wanted to go back to Bowling Green, Kentucky. And plus it kind of seems like a cool town also. I like Kentucky. It's nice. So then we crossed the state lines into Tennessee. Then we drove into Nashville, Tennessee, because Interstate 65 goes to Nashville, Tennessee. So then he exited Interstate 65, and then we started driving through this, like, I'm not sure what direction we were heading in, but we were driving through some roads on Nashville, Tennessee. I believe we were heading east, because we had a lot of twists and turns. And then, like, eventually we started driving through some really sketchy parts of Nashville, Tennessee, and then I wasn't really talking to him during the ride because I was just enjoying the scenery and everything. But when we were driving through the sketchy parts, I was like, wait a second, what are we doing here? And then I asked him, hey, why are we driving here? And no, I didn't ask him that. I said, "Hey, where are we going?" And then he looked right at me, and the way he looked at me, it was that look you give someone like, "Oh, I forgot about you," like that kind of look. That's the way he looked at me, and he was like, "Oh shit, I forgot." And then he quickly turned around, and then he started driving the opposite direction. We like completely backtracked every single way and every single turn we took. We drove all the way back to Interstate 95. We didn't go on to Interstate 95, I mean 65, but we passed Interstate 65, and then he drove me the other way to Nashville, like the downtown area of Nashville, towards it. And then he checked into a motel room in Nashville, Tennessee, and then he seemed much more serious at that point. His whole demeanor, like something was up, like, okay, something's going wrong. Like that's what his whole demeanor seemed like, and I wasn't asking him anything, really, but he checked into the motel, and then he knocked on the window and told me to get out of the car, and then he walked me over to the motel room, and then he said, if you hear anyone knocking on this door, whatever you do, do not open it for anyone. I have the key to this motel room, but if you hear someone knocking on the door, do not open it for anyone, okay? And I was just like, what? He said, just don't do that, okay? And I said, okay, I'll remember that. And he says, okay, just remember what I said. Do not open that door if anyone knocks on it, because I have the key to this motel room. So then he drove off and left. And then I was just like, well, okay then. And I just stayed back there. And I was watching some videos on my iPod Touch the whole entire time I was at the motel room. I really didn't think much of it, but looking back on that, that was kind of weird, really, that he told me that if anyone knocks on the motel room door, don't let them in. And it kind of did give me like a chilling feeling, and I kind of did feel a little freaked out, but I wasn't too concerned. So he was gone the whole entire day, and I was just in the hotel room hanging out by myself the whole entire day. Then eventually he came back like at night, and he let himself in and everything because he had the key to the hotel room, just like motel room, just like what he said. And he brought back a pepperoni pizza, and he said, I figured you might be hungry, so I brought you back this. And I was like, yeah, I am. And then we ate the pizza together, and me and him were just talking and hanging out the whole entire time, and I was telling him about the tri-state tornado of 1925 that was the deadliest tornado in U.S. history, and that it tore through 3 different states and killed 700 people, and he became very fascinated by that, and I said that there was a whole documentary about it on YouTube. So he had his laptop computer with him, and he pulled it out and opened it up, and we were watching the documentary, and he thought it was really creepy and really scary, and he says that he used to live in Alabama, and he told me that tornadoes hit Alabama a lot, and he saw like a tornado literally go right past his house while he was living in Alabama a few years ago, and he said that it was really scary and that they caused a lot of damage. And I was actually kind of surprised about that because I never really thought of Alabama as a tornado hotspot. Like I thought of Kansas and Oklahoma as tornado hotspots, and I know that tornadoes can happen anywhere, but I never really thought of Alabama itself as a tornado hotspot, really. But yeah, hearing him say that, I believed it. So we stayed the night at the motel in Nashville, Tennessee, and then the next morning, we woke up and we continued on to Alabama. We continued further down Interstate 65, and the furthest I ever gone before this trip down Interstate 65 was to Nashville, Tennessee, because we'd always take Interstate 65 to Florida. And after we reached Nashville on Interstate 65, the next road we would take was Interstate 24 to Chattanooga, and then I-75 from Chattanooga all the way down to Florida. But now on this trip, me and Randy, we were continuing down Interstate 65 all the way to Alabama, and I was excited to go there because I'd never been to Alabama. So then we eventually crossed into Alabama, and they had this sign up that said, "Welcome to Sweet Home, Alabama." It was a green sign, and they had these hills. They almost seemed more like mountains, but they didn't have any rocks on them. They were hills with grass and everything, but they were really tall, and I thought they were really pretty. And they had a lot of trees there too, and it was beautiful. I love the state of Alabama. We kept driving down Interstate 65. We passed Birmingham, Alabama, but we drove past Birmingham, Alabama. Then eventually we exited Interstate 65, and then he started driving down these back roads in Alabama, and I believe the direction we were heading in was east. That's what I believe the direction we were heading in. And then we kept driving through these back roads, and we were driving through them for a pretty long amount of time, really. And there was nothing really around the back roads, just a bunch of forest and a bunch of fields we kept driving through. They were all going through rural areas. And I kept thinking, if we keep driving east, we're eventually going to end up in the state of Georgia. But I knew that we were still in the state of Alabama. The reason why is because every now and then I would see a road sign, one of the Alabama state route road signs along the road. So that's how I knew we were in Alabama, because the roads were shaped like that. So, yeah. Then eventually I was looking around the forest we were driving through, and I saw this whole pile of destroyed trees and these broken stumps and everything. And Randy pointed to those, and he told me those were all caused by a tornado that hit. And I was like, "Oh, really?" And he said, "Yeah, those were." And I was like, "Oh, that's not good." And that kind of gave me the chills. And another thing was, the whole entire time we were driving through Alabama, like right when I saw the "Welcome to Alabama" sign, I was thinking of this girl who was killed by a tornado. Her name was Christina Hetchelbich. I mentioned her in an episode of Joe Winko Talk, the tornado injuries episode of Joe Winko Talk that I did a couple months ago. I'll have the link to that in the pinned comments as well. And I just kept seeing that picture of her in my mind over and over again. The one of her wearing the white top, and the one of her staring away, smiling. And it was very haunting to think about that, and to also see the trees torn down, and for him to point out that's where a tornado hit. So while we were driving down the country roads in Alabama, I asked him, "Where are we going?" And he said, "Oh, we're just going to go to my parents' house and stay there for a night." And then I was like, "Oh, your parents' house? Okay." And we kept driving. Then eventually we reached this house, like out in the middle of nowhere. It was like literally out in the middle of nowhere on the Alabama highway, on an Alabama road out in the country. And it had a barn behind it and everything, and I noticed a couple of cows there too. So he pulled up right in front of the house, and right as we were getting out, this man who was inside the house came out of the front door, and he was like coming out pretty fast, and I was just like, "Whoa," and I could tell that he wasn't in a good mood. And then Randy like stepped up and he started talking to this guy, and he said, "Hey dad, he's my friend." He said, "Hey dad, here's my friend." And then he was like, "He's not coming in this house." And he says, "Don't worry about him, he's a nice kid." And he says, "Really? Well, then what's up with that red thing he has on his head?" And he says, "Don't worry, it's just something he wears in all of his pictures he puts online. He's a nice kid. I took him down here and I've been talking to him for a while, and he's not one of us at all." That's what he told his dad, and I was just like, "What?" And I was just standing there like really confused, and it was kind of awkward really hearing all that. Then his dad looked over at me, and he like looked me directly in the eyes, and I was just standing there like, you guys can't really see my face right now, but I was just kind of confused and didn't really know what what was going on. And I was just like, "Is everything okay?" And right when he looked at me for a few seconds, he turned back to him and he said, "Okay, And that's what he said to him. Then Randy turned around at me and he said, "Hey, I got some stuff to do, but I'll be back to pick you up tomorrow morning." And then I just thought it was weird that he was leaving me there by myself. Then he got in the car and then he drove off, and I watched him drive off. And then this man walked over to me, the older man who came out of the house. And then, all right, for this video, I'm just going to say his name is George. That isn't his real name. That's the name I'm going to use for this video because I don't want to use his real name. Then I noticed a woman walking behind him. I'm just going to say her name was Nancy. Again, not her real name, but that's the name I'm going to use. George walked up to me and then he shook my hand and he said, "Hey, nice to meet you. My name is George." And I said, "Oh, hi, I'm Joe." And I was assuming that George was Randy's father because first of all, he was calling him dad. Randy was calling him dad. And also another thing, George also looked a lot like Randy too. They had the elfish shaped face and they had the big eyes also. Their eyes weren't the same color, but they both had the big eyes and he had the elfish shaped face, and he looked older than Randy though. But they weren't like extremely old. They looked like they were taking good care of themselves and everything. They didn't have to walk with the cane or anything. They're still walking around and moving around fine. Then he introduced me to his wife, Nancy, and they were really friendly people with southern accents, and I liked them. And they said, "Do you want to come inside?" And then I said, "Sure." And then I chuckled a little bit after I answered that because I was thinking, okay, I'm out in Alabama in the middle of nowhere, God knows where. Where else am I going to go? Seriously. So then we walked inside, and Nancy said that she was going to make dinner for us. And we were just like, okay. So we sat down in the dining room next to the kitchen while she was making dinner. And I sat across from his father, George. And then George was asking me, "So, what part of Alabama do you live in?" He talked in a southern accent. Randy didn't have a southern accent, but his parents did. So George asked me, "What part of Alabama do you live in?" And then I told George, "I don't live in Alabama." And he says, "Oh, really? Are you from Nashville?" And I said, "No, I don't live in Nashville either." And he says, "Oh, where do you live?" And I told him, "I live in West Dallas." And then he asked me, "Where's West Dallas?" And I forgot. I was like, well, duh, he's not going to know where West Dallas is if he's from Alabama. And I told him, "West Dallas is up in Wisconsin. It's 2 hours north of Chicago, right by Milwaukee." And then after I told him that, he was like, "Oh, wow, that far away?" And then he asked me, "Why did you come to Alabama? Are you hitchhiking or something? What made you want to come here?" And I told him, no, I didn't hitchhike here. Randy called me on the phone a couple nights ago, and he told me that he was going to come down to Alabama, and he said that he would come up to Wisconsin and take me with him." And then he said, "Randy brought you here all the way from Wisconsin?" And I told him, "Yeah, he did." So this is when things kind of got a little weird at that point. George then asked me, "Isn't West Dallas, Wisconsin, where that Jeffrey Dahmer guy was from? Wasn't that the guy who went into gay bars and murdered guys and ate them?" And I was like, yeah, that happened in West Dallas, Wisconsin." And then he says, "Do people still talk about that up there?" And I said, "Well, every now and then you'll hear about it, but that's as far as it goes. It happened a really long time ago. Not many people talk about it much." Then he asked me this. He asked me, "Well, don't guys like you up in Wisconsin know better not to get in the car with creepy guys or strangers at all?" And then I was just like, "What?" So I was just like, "What? What do you mean by that?" And he says, "You got in the car with my son and you had him drive you all the way down to Alabama, and you didn't notice anything weird about him at all?" That's what he was asking me, and I was just blown away at that comment because now, as I said earlier, I'm not close to my adoptive parents at all. I never knew my biological parents, but I know how parents treat their children. they try to make their children seem like the best people on the earth. They are really proud of their children. They put all their pride in their children, and they don't really like to down talk your children like that to like a stranger. That's kind of weird to say that you got in the car with a creepy person and say, "Oh, our son drove you all the way down here and you didn't notice anything strange about him at all." Well, yeah, I definitely did notice quite a bit of stuff that was strange about him, but it didn't bother me. I didn't say that out loud. And I said, "Well, no, I think he's really cool and I think he's very nice." And then George then asked me how old was I, and I told him I was 21 years old. Then he says, "Well, I remember being 21 years old. You think that you're invincible and you think that nothing out there can harm you, but you better be careful around Randy. He's not really right in the head, and if you if you spend too much time with him, you're definitely going to eventually end up seeing that." And I was just like, that just kind of gave me a chill, really, to hear someone talk about their own son like that. And I was just thinking, gosh, well, oh. And right then, luckily his wife came in with some food and she put the food on the table. And then you said, "You should listen to my husband because he's definitely telling the truth." That's what she told me. And they both nodded at me. And then I was just like, oh, well, okay. Then we were just eating dinner together and we were just talking to each other and it was a nice dinner, really. She made pork chops and she made mashed potatoes and I thought those were really good. And I was talking to them about Wisconsin and how I didn't like it up there. They asked me how I liked Alabama, and I told them that I liked Alabama and I thought it was really nice. And plus, it was a lot warmer because up in Wisconsin it was chilly because it was April. But down in Alabama, it was like 80 something degrees, and it didn't feel weird to not wear my shirt at all. And then they were also asking me about how I kept my bandana to stick straight up and pointy, and they said they actually like what I do with my bandana. And I thought that was pretty interesting because earlier he was saying, "What about that red thing on his head?" And then oh yeah, George also said that he was sorry for saying everything earlier when Randy dropped me off at the house. He said that the people that Randy hang out with, they're never really good people, and he said that he never really likes having them at the house at all because they do bad things. He didn't go into detail at all. He was being very vague about everything, really. He wasn't telling me the full details, but he said that the people Randy hangs out with aren't really good people at all, and he said that I was completely different from the friends Randy had over before. And I was just like, oh, well, okay. Another thing I noticed about that house, every single room in the house that I walked into, all of them had crosses hanging up. Like every single room, there was a crucifix hanging up somewhere. And I was just thinking, okay, these people must be very religious, and their son is a Satan worshiper. So gosh, that sounds like a very dramatic match right there. So after we had dinner, they asked me if I wanted to see their cows they have, because they have cows and they said that they're milking cows and everything. And I was like, sure, I'll see them. So we went outside and they showed me the cows they have, and they were out by the barn. And like I walked in and I saw the two cows, and they said you can pet them if you want to. And I said, really? And they said, yeah, you can pet them. They're milking cows. They're used to being around people. They're very nice, and there are like three of them. So I reached out my hand and let them sniff me, and they sniffed my hand, and then I started petting them, and they were so cute. I loved those cows. They were so adorable, but they were huge too, and they also didn't smell very good, but they were huge too, and they were so cute. And then they actually let me milk one of them. Now that was a new one. I never milked a cow before, but now at 21 years old, I finally did, and I thought that was awesome, and I thought it was kind of funny too. So then after that, we just hung out with each other, and we were just talking the whole entire time. And I was telling them about the cows, and I was telling them about how much I love pets and everything. And I told them about my pet guinea pigs, and I was telling them about Riot from Wisconsin, who was my only friend back in Wisconsin, and it was really nice. I liked the whole atmosphere of the house and everything, like a quiet country house out in the middle of nowhere. It kind of reminded me of Courage the Cowardly Dog, except it wasn't in the desert at all. It was out in the fields and there were forests around, but it was nice. And then, they said I could use their shower up in the bathroom near the guest bedroom upstairs. They pointed to where it is, and they said I could sleep in the guest room. So then I stayed the night there, and the next morning I woke up, and Nancy made breakfast for all of us, and we were talking to each other, and George told me that Randy was on his way to come pick me up, and he said that he was going to give me a ride back to Wisconsin, and he said he'd be there in like an hour or so, and I said, oh, well, okay. But then another thing happened. George told me to be very careful around Randy. They said, be very careful around him, because he may seem like a nice person, but he's not right in the head. That's what they were telling me the whole entire time. And it just kind of hurt my feelings how they kept talking about Randy and saying that he wasn't right in the head and everything. Because, I talked to Randy for a really long time, from December 2016, and this was in April 2017. So then I just said, well, I like Randy. He seems like a pretty cool person. I mean, I was talking to him for quite a while. He listens to everything I say, and he's very nice, and he got food for me and everything. And I knew him for 5 months already, but then his mother put her hand on my shoulder and she said, you may have talked to him for 5 months, but we had him for 30 years. Trust me, you best stay away from him, and after he takes you back to Wisconsin, you best not meet up with him again. Do not get in the car with him again, and do not let him take you that far away again, and you probably shouldn't even talk to him again. That's what she told me, and I was just like, what? And I didn't say that out loud. I was just like, what? And I was just like, and George then said, there's stuff that Randy did that you don't even want to know about, and I'm not going to tell you because he's giving you a ride back to Wisconsin, and I don't want you to be on edge at all. But just be on the lookout for anything weird. And I was just like, oh well, okay. And then we just I was weirded out that whole entire time. I kind of got a chill and everything. So then eventually Randy came to the house and he was ready to pick me up, and I got my bag and I said goodbye to Nancy and I said goodbye to George, and they told me to stay safe, and they said come back whenever you want to, and I thought that was kind of weird that they told me that, because they just told me to stay away from Randy. How else am I going to come back to the house? That's the whole reason why I found it in the first place. So I got back in the car with Randy, and then we drove off and left, and then Randy was asking me, oh, how was staying a night with them? And I said, they're pretty cool. I like them. They're really nice. And then Randy says that he hates his parents and everything, and that he doesn't like them. And I said, what? Why? And then he says, they're very judgmental and they don't understand anything. They're stuck in their own bubble. That's what he was saying. And then I was just like, okay. And I didn't really ask him much about that, because I just figured that that's probably something that I probably should just stay out of. Even though he knew all of my business, I was thinking, okay, I probably shouldn't ask him anything about what happened there. So we drove north on Interstate 65, and we just kind of drove straight through up Interstate 65 past Birmingham into Tennessee, and past Tennessee back into Kentucky. But then I remembered the Waverly Hills Sanitarium in Louisville, Kentucky, and I asked him, Randy, would it be okay if we made a detour? I just really want to see the Waverly Hills Sanitarium in Louisville, Kentucky. And he asked me, what's the Waverly Hills Sanitarium in Louisville, Kentucky? And I told him, it's a big, scary building where 6,000 people died of tuberculosis. And he says, ooh, that sounds scary. Let's go see it. And I said, I'm not sure how close we can get to it because the place is pretty guarded up and guarded off, but let's go see it. And he said, oh, okay, I'll come with you. So then we drove up to the Waverly Hills Sanitarium in Louisville, Kentucky, and it was kind of blocked off and everything. I only got to see like a small section of the building. I couldn't really see it very much because there were so many trees everywhere blocking the view of the building. But then, but then, Randy, me and Randy were a little bit disappointed because we couldn't get closer to the building at all. And I said they do haunted house tours there and everything. And he said, "Oh, I didn't know about this place. It does look creepy from what I can see." Because I also showed him a picture of it on my phone. And then I told him, "I'm just gonna record a quick video by here real quick." And he said, "Okay, I'll be in the car waiting for you." And I said, "Okay." So that's where I recorded the video of me in front of the Waverly Hills Sanitarium. I actually did get to see it. I didn't get to see the whole building. I didn't get to see the front part of it, but I did get to see the side view of it. So I'm happy about that at least. And I recorded a quick video of me by it. You can barely see the building in the video, but I'll have a link to it in the pinned comments. And I hope one day I get to go back there because I always wanted to visit the Waverly Hills Sanitarium. But I kind of did get to visit it that time, but not quite as close as I wanted to. But I'm still grateful nonetheless. Hope I get to go back there another time. Nothing wrong with backtracking. So we got back in the car, back into his car, and then he said that he wanted to show me the cabin that his parents got for him out in Indiana. And I said, "Oh, your parents got you a cabin?" And then he told me that it was amazing how much me and him were alike because my adoptive parents put me into an apartment because me and them weren't getting along, and he knew all about that. He said it was basically the same in his life also because him and his parents weren't getting along either, so they put him out in a cabin up in Indiana. And I thought that was kind of weird that they sent him that far from Alabama to Indiana to get away from them. And he says that he comes back to the cabin every now and then and he chills and hangs out there. So he took me to the cabin out in Indiana, and it wasn't really that far away from Louisville, Kentucky. You can see the Ohio River. There's a small little town that has the Ohio River by it, and we drove through there past the Ohio River, and then I think we went north of the Ohio River to get to the little cabin he has. And I thought it was really cool. I liked the cabin. It was nice. And we got to the cabin and we were just hanging out with each other at the cabin. But then eventually we got bored. And he asked me, "So what do you want to do now?" And it was late. So we were kind of getting a little tired, but we weren't tired enough to fall asleep yet. I asked him if he wanted to watch a movie with me on YouTube, and we didn't have any Wi Fi at the cabin, but he said that he could use his cell phone as a hotspot. So he used his cell phone as a hotspot, and we loaded up YouTube on his laptop computer. And I wanted to show him this movie I've been watching. It's called Girl Fight. It's a Lifetime movie about these high school girls who beat up their friend and like they get into an argument with their friend and then they record themselves beating her up and they post it online to become famous, and a bunch of bad stuff ends up happening to them and they get in trouble for it. It's a very dramatic movie, and it'll make you angry if you see it because it kind of shows how shallow people are in high school. And no offense to any high schoolers who are watching this video, but it kind of shows how shallow people can be in high school. So then he watched that movie with me, and I asked him if he remembered being in high school, and he said that he did remember high school, and I showed him these are the high school kids I had to deal with back in 2011. We watched the video together, and I could tell that he wasn't really taking it very well, but we finished the whole video, and then he said that I asked him what did he think of it, and he said that video is messed up, and he was really angry about it, and like a bit more angry than I thought he would be. And then I started remembering what George told me, and then I was trying not to think about it so much. But then we fell asleep, and I fell asleep on the couch. He slept in the bed. The next morning, he woke me up, and he was ready to take me back to Wisconsin now. And we were on the way back to Wisconsin, and the whole entire time, he seemed like really tense and like really angry and agitated. And at that time, I was asking him, "What's wrong? Why are you upset? Are you upset about something?" And he said that he kept thinking about that movie that we both watched last night called Girl Fight. And I told him, "It's just a movie. It's not really real or anything." Then he told me this. He told me, "You're lucky that you get to die and leave everyone and just go out to a forest and die because people on this earth are fucked up." And then I got kind of freaked out at first and I was like, whoa, what does he mean by that? What is this guy planning on doing? But then right away I remembered that he told me that if I couldn't find anyone to live with by October when my apartment lease expired and when I became homeless, that he was going to leave me out in the forest in North Carolina where I was going to die and where I was going to die of my diabetes complications and everything. And then I just remembered that and I said, "Oh, that's what he meant." But that did really freak me out at first when he said that. But after I remembered that, then I didn't wasn't really bothered about it so much. And then he said that he wished he can go out to a forest and die, but he knows he can't because he doesn't have type 1 diabetes, and if he doesn't need insulin to survive, he would just have to starve to death and everything, which is much worse than dying of no insulin. And then I told him, that's when I finally told him about what the psychic said. And I said, actually, the some I went to a psychic and she said she saw me out in the forest and she said that I wasn't going to die a very painless death. She said I was going to die an extremely violent death. And then he got curious and he wasn't so angry anymore. He was like, "An extremely violent death? What do you mean? Or do you run into a serial killer out in the woods?" And I told him, "No, I don't get killed by someone. I get killed by something." And he says, "Oh, what happens?" And he was asking me this while he was driving. And he says, "What did she say would happen out in the forest?" And that's when I told him that the psychic had a vision that I was out in the forest and that I was really sick and that each day that passes I get sicker and sicker. And then she said on the last day that a storm starts out in the forest and she hears a loud slamming noise and thundering. And then a tornado starts, and then I get sucked inside the tornado and ripped apart. And I told him how the psychic said I was going to be mutilated by this tornado, and then they were going to find my body in a pile of broken trees, and then I was going to be buried in a Carolina cemetery as a John Doe. And when I told him that, I was kind of surprised by his reaction. He actually got kind of sad, and I was starting to see that I think that he was bipolar because he goes from being really angry to really sad like that fast. And he said, "Oh, that's not good." And he like, it literally seemed like he was tearing up. And I don't know, I just thought it was really weird, really, to see him get that upset by hearing that. And he put his hand on my shoulder and he told me, "You really do not deserve that at all." That's what he told me. And that really warmed my heart when he said that he told me I don't deserve that at all. And I was just thinking about how I met him with the necrophiliac website and all those guys claiming that they wanted to rip me apart and murder me. And here I am with a guy who's telling me that I don't deserve that at all. And that really touched my heart. The thing is, he was a straight guy, though. He wasn't gay at all. Um, so yeah, that's the thing. Because he knew I was gay, though, and he even told me that he was straight and not interested in a romantic relationship. But yeah, that really warmed my heart hearing him say that, really. And then he finally drove me back to Wisconsin, and he dropped me off at Rainbow Park. But before I got out of the car, I showed him my cell phone, and I showed him the picture of the girl that I kept thinking about, Christina Hetchelbach. And I told him that this was the girl I was thinking about while we were driving through Alabama. I kept thinking about her over and over again because she lived in Alabama, and she was killed by a tornado in Alabama back in 2012. And he told me that she was really pretty. And he said that it was really sad. And he told me that she didn't deserve it either. And he said that it was really sad. And he said that he hoped things would get better for me. And before I got out of the car and left, he like opened his arms up because he wanted to give me a hug. So I gave him a hug. And then like I got out of the car, and as I was walking away, he was watching me as I was walking away. And then I looked back at him, and he looked back at me, and then I waved goodbye to him, and then he waved, and he drove off and left, and that was the last time I ever saw him, really. We still talked a bit after that, about how my life was going, and about how mad I was at my adoptive parents, and about how I hated Wisconsin, and about how much fun it was going to Alabama, and how much I appreciated that. But eventually what happened is I eventually ended up telling my adoptive parents about what the psychic said, and my adoptive parents were like really freaked out about everything I told them about the psychic, about me getting left in the forest for dead and killed by a tornado. And they explained to me that they're very religious and they believe in God. They said that they didn't care what I do with my life and what ends up happening to me, but they said that if they would have let me become homeless, and if I would have been left in a forest for dead and killed by a tornado because they allowed me to become homeless, they believed that God would have punished them for it because it would have been all their fault for letting me become homeless, which it totally would have been, absolutely, and that God would have sent them to hell for it. So, because of that, they said they were going to be sending me down south to live with relatives, and here I am now. And eventually, I told Randy about that while we were on the phone with each other one day. I said that he didn't have to leave me out in the forest in North Carolina anymore because my adoptive parents were going to be sending me down south to live with their relatives. And I said that I didn't have to die now. And he was happy about it. He said that he was really glad that he didn't have to leave me in the forest. And then he said that he hoped things would get better for me. And I said, we could still keep in touch if you want to. And he said, okay, I guess we could. And that was actually the last time I ever talked to him. I never really talked to him again after that, because we just kind of drifted apart at that point. And eventually I did remember him and did try to get back in contact with him, but I couldn't get in touch with him at all. And I thought it was kind of weird that I couldn't get back in touch with him at all. And I was wondering, is he okay? Did something happen to him? I still don't know what happened to Randy, and I still am a bit worried, but the thing is, what probably happened is he probably just forgot about me and he probably just moved on. Because the thing is, a lot of people do that anyway, and I don't really blame him for it. And he was a good friend. He took me to Alabama, got me out of the house when I was upset at my adoptive parents. And this road trip was a lot different from the road trip to Arkansas, because with the road trip to Arkansas, I got to choose all the places we went. But on the road trip to Alabama, I didn't get to choose any of the places, but I did get to go to the Waverly Hills Sanitarium. That was one place I got to go, but I didn't really get to see much of a close-up of it, but I still got to go there anyway, and I'm still grateful for that. And yeah, so another thing is that he was a Satan worshiper, and I thought about it a few times. I thought it was pretty ironic that he took me on a road trip down Interstate 65, because what's 65 plus 1? 66. add one more six to that, and you get 666, which is the devil's number. So that was another thing that I thought was a bit ironic, really. And overall, it was a fun trip. It was a little bit weird, and it did get a little bit creepy traveling with him after a while. But I really just hope that he's all right, and I really just hope that nothing bad happened to him, really. And I hope he's doing good. And another thing, I know I said this earlier, I never told him about my YouTube videos because I didn't share those on the Satan worshipping website at all. So, yeah. And I kind of prefer for him not to find my YouTube videos, but if he does, he does. I didn't use his real name, so at least I went that far. So that's basically it for this episode of Joe Winko Talk. Please tell me what you guys thought of it, and what did you think of this whole road trip and everything, and what did you think of everything that went on, and what did you think of... Never mind. Never mind. We'll not even go there. So don't forget to like, don't forget to comment, don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to like me on Facebook and follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr. So that's it. Peace out, people.